Happy May Day! My name is Toni Gilpin, and I'm the author of The Long Deep Grudge, a story of big capital, radical labor, and class war in the American heartland, published early this year by Haymarket Books. And that's altogether fitting, since the legacy of the Haymarket Riot, as it's sometimes called, is one of the themes of my book. May Day, the international workers' holiday, as many of you I'm sure know, traces its origins back to that 19th century event. Here's the standard summary. It was the height of the Gilded Age, when a few families accumulated staggering fortunes while an expanding working class grew ever more immiserated. On May 1st, 1886, workers across the country began a massive general strike on behalf of the 8-hour day. In Chicago alone, at least 30,000 walked off their jobs. A few days later, a clash between strikers and police in front of the massive McCormick factory in Chicago left several workers dead. A protest rally at Haymarket Square was called for the following evening. It was well past dark, and the event was nearly over when a bomb suddenly exploded. In the resultant chaos, 7 police officers and an unknown number of workers were killed. Insisting they were under assault by dynamite-toting terrorists, establishment forces unleashed a full-scale crackdown on union activists across the country. 8 Chicago labor leaders were promptly arrested for murder, though there was no evidence that any of them had actually constructed or thrown the bomb. In fact, only 2 of them had even been present at the rally when the explosion occurred. Their sensational trial garnered international attention. All the defendants were found guilty, and in November 1887, 4 of them were hanged. Soon thereafter, workers' organizations around the world began memorializing the Haymarket martyrs on May 1st, which in many countries is still officially celebrated as Labor Day. In remembrances of Haymarket, especially here in the U.S., the martyrs are often identified simply as union organizers, guilty of nothing more than advocating for the 8-hour day. Yet such a benign characterization does them a disservice. They were committed members of Chicago's then vibrant anarchist movement, and thus were not reformers, but revolutionaries. Their theory of anarchism, singular enough to be dubbed the Chicago Idea, posited that labor unions were the essential agents that could achieve the overthrow of capitalism and through which a new order by and for the working class would be erected. While they joined the complex coalition of labor groups, which included then insular craft-based unions and the more inclusive quasi-utopian Knights of Labor, organizing for the 1886 general strike, the anarchists viewed the 8-hour demand as far too timid. They believed, at the least, that they should insist that wages not be reduced when hours were, so as to ensure that profits, and thus capital's power, would be eroded. The anarchists were not averse to the strategic use of violence against their elite enemies. The word strategic is the operative word, however, and so it is unlikely that the men who stood trial in 1886 were responsible for the Haymarket bombing, which served no purpose besides providing the authorities with a ready excuse to eradicate what was then a burgeoning workers' movement. But there is no question that the Chicago anarchists took the concept of class war literally. The day will come when our silence will be more powerful than the voices you strangle today. So the anarchist August Spies vowed as the noose was slipped over his head. And indeed, the anarchist radical legacy would be revived in the 1930s by the left-wing Chicago-based farm equipment workers, known as the FE, the main focus of my book. One of the FE's top officials proclaimed that the philosophy of our union was that management had no right to exist, a concept not too far removed from the Chicago Idea. As the FE set out to organize farm equipment factories like McCormick Works, the very same plant that had proved pivotal in the 1886 struggle, its leaders made frequent reference to Haymarket and continued to do so through the FE's existence. They wanted to ensure that union members recognized the debt they owed to those 19th century radical organizers. Creating an abiding sense of class consciousness requires knowledge of the continual struggle marked by tragedy and triumph waged by workers under capitalism. As we commemorate this May Day, let's remember the Haymarket martyrs in full, as union organizers and radicals both, who fought not just to improve conditions for workers, but for a world that would genuinely belong to them.